All right, we are live. So we've got a few people coming in, but we'll go ahead. We have a lot we want to cover today. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So first of all, welcome everybody to today's presentation. Really excited to have you here, and I think this is going to be really valuable. Just a couple of quick announcements up front. First of which is that we are recording this, so we'll be sharing the recording with all the attendees and registrants afterwards. So no stress there. And second, there is going to be some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions as we're going along, there is a little Q&A widget. Feel free to drop your questions there or in chat. We'll be monitoring chat. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to our speakers today.
Well, hey, everyone. I'll introduce myself real quick, and then Janessa, I'll hand it to you for intros, and then I'll get started. I just want to say first, I'm Justin Dunham, one of the founders of Aircool. I feel very grateful whenever marketers come and spend a little bit of time with us, and I really appreciate your sharing a little bit of your day with us so we can give you some information about what we're seeing in the field, what's working, what's not working, different ways to frame the work you're doing for better impact. Like I said, I'm a founder of Aircool, and what we do is we help companies turn organic into their strongest growth channel. We mostly work with B2B SaaS, 20 to 100 million of ARR, and we tie GEO and SEO, content production, content engineering, agents, all of that stuff into analytics, into a cohesive system that you can really feel good about, that uses your content to drive customers to you, that's tieable to pipeline. So that's what we do, and that's who I am. And Janessa, I'll give it to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm here as a super fan of Aircool and Justin. So I met Justin when I was leading marketing at DBT Labs. They were our SEO, AEO agency, and just phenomenal partners to us there. And so happy to continue to have projects to do with Justin and be here with all of you today.
Cool. All right, well, let me throw the slides up here and I'll get started. So the marketing throuple, and I have to tell you, this has led to a lot of awkward conversations with clients before I explained what I was referring to. Like, what are you talking about? But the reason we came up with this title is to emphasize this very specific issue around AI, which is it used to be that you had a totally direct line to your customer. You could say things, you could feel confident that they were receiving the message from you. And now there is this third party, Claude or LLMs. I'll sometimes just talk about Claude, but I'm referring to any LLM. And so what we want to cover today is, evidence that it's happening, what to do about it, how to deal with it, some ways of shifting the ways you're thinking about it so that you can get better results here. And what I think what we want you all to walk away with is, okay, I understand how to frame the problem better for people inside the business so that they really understand what's at stake here and what's going on. And I feel like I have an approach to tackle this that I can start implementing right away using the skills I'm already building with AI. So that's what we'll do today. So go on to the next slide here, which is just kind of talking through the marketing throuple concept. So this is this idea that it used to be that you wrote the message, and yeah, like we had SEO, we had social, we had all this other stuff, and the distribution was controlled by these algorithms. And that's still the case, like search is still a thing. But at the end of the day, people were still clicking through to your content. They were seeing the message that you wrote. That's not the case anymore. So now what happens is AI reads everything you've ever published. It synthesizes its own answer with or without your participation. The example I like to give for this, and I'll show this in a minute, is if somebody asks AI what your pricing is, AI is going to come up with an answer for what your pricing is, regardless of whether you talk about it or not. And the buyer might never see your site. Now, sites are still getting traffic, organic search is still a thing, like we still are driving people there, but now there's this additional class of interactions which you don't control at all. So AI has sort of broken that deal of you're going to get to talk to your buyer directly with your messaging.
And just if I can interject here, I think that what's so important to remember about this shift is like like in SEO, you would show up if you indicated to Google, we have something to say about this topic, you would show up. If you were interesting on social, the algorithm would surface you, right? But AI is also tailoring what you say to your buyer.
Yes.
Right. So like they know your buyer and their perspective. Like I'm in Claude all day. It knows who I am and what I want. And so in that way, the relationship starts to look much more like enablement of the AI rather than these other algorithmic relationships.
That's a great point. And when we talk later in this presentation too about query length and other things like that, I think that will shine through for sure. But that's a really important part of this too, that AI is customized, right? It's deeply customized to everybody who is talking to it. And so we have to figure out how to deal with that and enable its scale. So I like to give this example for people who are not convinced yet, which is this great thing from Sam Lambert at Planet Scale. And you can look up this thread, but Claude was literally telling users that Planet Scale had shut down. And no shade on Planet Scale, probably not anything they were doing, but it picked that information up somewhere. And there's really nothing that you can do about it when that happens. If Anthropic, if ChatGPT, if Claude and all the other LLMs and Gemini are willing to tell buyers that your service is shut down when it hasn't, imagine where it might also be going wrong on much more subtle things like, what is the correct messaging for this buyer? What do we want to say to them? What is the right message that we're trying to give them? So that's just sort of some proof points around this idea that that AI is talking to your buyers about you. And I'm sure you've run into this too. If you Claude your own brand, you will find all kinds of inaccuracies. And this is just a slide that sort of summarizes what we've just been talking about, which is this movement from the Google era, from Google showing your content and letting you hang on to the, not the distribution piece, but the message piece, to the social era where LinkedIn and other platforms are controlling your reach. And now you have this extra thing that you need to deal with, which is AI is synthesizing everything. And it's like a BDR who you didn't hire and you don't even know what conversations they're having. Janessa, did you want to add anything else here before I
that's the biggest shift, right? Is this idea of that you don't own the message in the same way that you did. And for me, this is what gets lost a lot in the more technical conversations about what to do about AEO and GEO and text.LLMs, right? It kind of loses this fundamental shift. And maybe this is like the thing to take away, if nothing else, from today, which is that we have to be enabling AI in the same way that you would enable a BDR on your team. And I think that's such a good, or like an over-enthusiastic intern, right? Somebody who's just going to go nuts in promoting your company. Have you given them the right context to do that really well? I think is the right frame to start the internal conversation about what are we doing about all this AI stuff and AI visibility? Have we done the foundational enablement work of AI?
Yeah. And Claude is nothing if not an over-enthusiastic intern. I love that. Analogy. I think we can all relate to that. So AI has broken this deal, and there are these three very specific things. So it reads everything. It never says I don't know. How often?
It rarely says I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to prompt it very specifically. Even
yeah.
that. And it also doesn't send the click a lot of the time. Sometimes it will, but a lot of the time it won't. And so the buyer gets the answer, moves on, and you never even know that conversation is happening. So these are the three things that kind of change with this new algorithm that we need to deal with that gets between us and our buyer. The metaphor that we sometimes also use for this, and Janessa, we used to say it's a stew pot, but I think salad bar is much more apt. And do you want to talk about this one, Janessa?
Yeah, it's just this idea again, like if when you're dealing with Google, you basically say like, I've got a little slice of pizza, and then Google's like, oh, you're looking for pizza, they've got pizza, right? And if you're on social, it's like, wow, everyone is talking about these great cupcakes, they've got the great cupcakes. But with AI, it's much more of saying like, hey, person on the other side, This is Claude, the third in your relationship, saying, hey, what is it you want? What are you looking for? And intermediating that. They're going to fix the plate for your customer. They're going to put it all together. They're going to pick it out. The question is, how good are your ingredients? And I think a lot of the AI conversation today is coming as these mandates. I don't know if any of you are getting this, right? Mandates from the CEO or the board. And it's like, what are we doing about AI? We got to do more about AI. We got to get on this AI visibility stuff. And again, we start with the ingredients, right? We have to enable AI with really good raw ingredients. It's probably going to cook up something good, but it's a very different approach than saying we have control over exactly what gets served. How good are your ingredients? If the results are coming out the other side and they're bad, there's probably something wrong with your salad bar. Have I beaten this metaphor to death?
I love it. And that just makes me want to go to, the deli down the street and get a salad right after this. Like that. But I also really like this slide because like some of these little examples that you put here, Janessa, are just like, really think about this. Like your 2022 press release totally shows up in AI answers. So like, planet scale shut down, whatever it was, probably from somebody's comment or even maybe from something on their side that could have been interpreted that way. Who knows, right? The random engineering blog, when your product was, instead of a data lake, it was a data mesh, or the other way around, or when you were SaaS for HR instead of SaaS for some other thing, whatever it was, you wrote all this stuff and you left it on the site. Yeah.
I just thought of another great example here that I want to share. I was working with a client who was very strong on promoting their internal culture. And they would produce these great blogs when a new team member would join and interview them. And it was wonderful content that promoted them as a great place to work. And they were a great place to work. It completely confused LLMs. And so what would come out when you would talk about the company would be these very random terms, this kind of misunderstanding of what the company was. That wasn't bad content. Yeah. And in a different time, it would have been great content, right? It doesn't mean that that was a bad approach or they shouldn't do that. But that's such a good example of how, what is on the salad bar is creating a dish that you don't actually want to serve.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody thought that Nutella would be a good thing to have in the salad bar. And now we have salads with Nutella. So there are lots of tools that we have now that can help us deal with this, controlling the buffet, and that's what we need to think in terms of. So this concept that we want to talk about in terms of, we've framed the problem for you, and now what we want to talk about is, what does the solution look like to this piece of the problem? And that is AI enablement. And this is part of the overall content system concept that we'll talk about shortly. But the same way that you would enable your sales team, because your sales team is on calls, making statements about the product, making statements about what you offer, you always enable them. You have your decks, you have your battle cards, you give them talk tracks, all those things so that they say the right stuff, so that you get the right customers, that they're able to close the right deals. It's exactly the same thing that we need to do with AI, except that the way we do it with AI is, what is the messaging on the site and is it consistent? Do we have depth on our key topics? This is a really big one that we run into with clients who have shifted their product or shifted their messaging or offering something different than they did 5 years ago, which is a lot of people, that they have all this old stuff and they wonder why LLMs say that they're great at the old stuff and not at the new stuff. It's because they don't have any depth on the new stuff. Coverage of your personas, velocity on new topics, a current library. These are all things that you want to put in the salad bar, and that we can use AI to help us with this stuff and build a system for it. But your website is really a training set. Go ahead. Yeah.
If I can interject again, I think there's this question here too of like, well, what about Reddit? What about LinkedIn? What about YouTube? We know these other things matter. How do I think about those other priorities against the need to do this AI enablement work?
So there are some great offsite channels. The web, your own site right now, is the easiest place to control. It is required that you control it. If you post something great on Reddit about, whatever topic it is, and your website contradicts it, it's probably not going to work too well. And those are awesome things to build, but some of those things you can handle by building your content system. So even if you're thinking about, we're going to get our website content straight first. That is your lowest hanging fruit. And then once you've done that and that looks good, yeah, like it's, becomes much easier to add on some of these other motions so that you cover off some of those other places that AI is getting citations. And I'm happy to talk about that part in detail too, because we work with some of our clients on Wikipedia and LinkedIn and other things like that. But for almost everyone we work with, the website is the biggest opportunity, at least, for the foreseeable future, to get things straight and consistent. Awesome. And I use that word consistent very specifically because you need to speak consistently. So what I'm going to go through in the next few slides is like the ways to speak, the attributes you want from your content library. So one of them is consistency. We have a client who has asked us a bunch of times, this very good long-term relationship, but he was asked us a bunch of times, why does Claude think that we are a data mesh company? And it is because there is so much data mesh content on their site from when they used to be a data mesh. And the presence of all that content and the fact that it hasn't been updated and that it's hard to get people to like realize they need to look at it again causes Claude to surface them in a lot of the wrong deals and a lot of the wrong questions because they're not focused on that anymore. So this idea of consistency, here's what we are, we have depth in our key topics for all the things that we actually care about is really key. And it's sort of pillar one of this AI enablement piece. Janessa, do you want to throw anything else in here before I go through the other pillars?
No, just that this is kind of hidden on the chart, but that this is a visibility column, right? And so you're actually seeing they're actually rising in data mesh visibility, right? They have good content. The content is performing well. It's doing exactly what you want it to do. It's getting in front of more people, but it's actually contrary to the brand.
In this case, it's actually sort of bad news that their visibility is rising for this thing.
Yeah.
And that's something we've never dealt with before, right? We always have historically wanted things to go up and to the right, whichever way right is for folks watching. But for some things, we actually want to go down and to the left because it's not who we are anymore. And that helps us down funnel. So that's one. The next thing is this example from some of the work that we've done with DBT historically, and just like looking at all the ways that they are positioned. And Janessa, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but this is an analysis that we did, kind of asking the simple question of what is this thing? And Janessa, do you want to talk a bit more about this slide?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a good example of a company with who just changed a lot, right? It started as an open source tool. Then it became a cloud product. Then it added, these other feature sets, these different pricing models, right? And so this is a company that's been around for 10 years, right? And so that, but all of that in the past wouldn't have been a problem in a way that it is today, right? And so then you go, you know what? There's a lot of variation in how AI describes this company. Different prompts elicit very different results, right? Well, why is that? Oh, because we're actually communicating. We're enabling the AI around all of these very, different ways of talking about what the product does.
We're enabling it whether we want to or not. And so you end up with mixed messages. The next one is we talked about consistency. We're going to talk about depth. So AI is going to come up with answers for you on whatever topics people care about. And the more that you surface around a certain topic, the more you're going to show up in AI for that topic. So conversely, you want to speak deeply and have lots of content on the topics that matter to you today, not the topics that mattered to you 5 years ago. And that's important. So there's a messaging piece to this, which is making sure we're saying the right things. And there's also a piece around topic depth for what we care about today versus what we cared about a while ago. And that helps you show up in the right places.
And if I can add on to this, Justin, I think what's interesting here is a lot of developer products do well in how much AI understands them. And it's because they build out robust documentation. Yep. And that is the exact kind of source material AI needs to make sense of your product and teach other people about your product. So I think that there's a lesson here for other types of products as well, right? Where we all might need more documentation than what we would have historically done. And that's content that's at a technical, like a rich level technical depth, how a specific feature works that normally a content team may not have produced or even thought about, suddenly becomes much more important in the quality of your salad bar.
And there's a side note here too, which we won't get into today, but that content is a little more collaborative than it was. So like your docs team, your CS team, those people are, first of all, people who maybe need to be a little bit more involved in the production of all content, because that makes it original and interesting to read, but also because LLMs don't care if something's in the help site versus on the blog. Like, you have to be consistent across everything. The third kind of pillar here is just speaking broadly. And again, this is another area, and we'll get into this in a second. It's just like, what are all the questions that a buyer might ask AI about you? You can find these all over the place. Like Profound will give you its prompt volume tool, and you can use that. You can look in Google Search Console, will actually give you queries, because you can look at kind of the long tail things that Claude goes out and searches Google for you. Bing Webmaster Tool is actually really good for this. Looking at your sales calls, looking at LinkedIn and Reddit, like all of those questions that people have, all of the use cases, all of the industries, those are places that you want to have pretty thorough coverage on based on some of that basic enablement material. Janessa, anything to add to this one?
I think the buying committee becomes very important in this world, right? Like, so you assume that your core buyer is, doing some initial research with Claude, but also assume that the chief security officer and the finance person, right? They're also going to go into Claude and figure out what this thing is about. And Claude is going to tailor its responses based on what it knows about them, right? Yep. And so in the past, maybe you wouldn't have prioritized a page for each of those people, or a buying committee content asset. And that starts to feel more important when you think about your friend Claude going out there and speaking on your behalf to these different people in the buying committee.
Yep. So those are, so broadly, deeply, consistently. And then there is also, let me get to the next slide here. Something that I just like to throw this example out. This is going to feel like a little bit of a detour, but like, speaking broadly includes things like your pricing and, what you offer versus competitors, and direct competitive comparisons, all that stuff. So this is an example I really like to show, which is for a client that we worked with, you can ask Claude what their pricing is, and Claude's source for their pricing is their competitor. And this is a response from Claude about a company's pricing from their competitor. So just let that sink in, because this company doesn't want to talk about their pricing on the site. They may have strategic reasons, all kinds of other reasons to do that, but this is the consequence, which is somebody else will publish about it. One of the tactics that we used even before AI was a thing was we used to work with clients to publish pricing pages for their competitors, just as normal SEO pages. So like, our client is company X, and we say to them, we should publish a company-wide pricing page. And those often actually do really well. And now in AI, you just cannot escape that, because your customer will get an answer about your pricing. Whether it's right or wrong depends on whether you're willing to expose any information about it. So that's a little bit more on pillar 3, but then pillar 4 is, and I think this is some of what you were talking about, Janessa, is just speaking to more people, hitting everybody in the buying committee. And then the last one I think is really interesting too, is just responding faster. So we have a lot of content flows that we set up with clients that let them rapidly respond with a blog post to some interesting topic that has just come up. And the idea is that by fundamentally enabling AI with the correct positioning, the correct messaging, the right things to say, that you can actually generate a pretty good draft of what we should be saying about this news topic that our buyers care about, or what we want to say about a competitive campaign again that's getting run against us, or some other development or new version or whatever it is. So this is really useful. And the other piece to this is that if we're able to publish that thoughtful take, then AI can use that to talk about us to the people who are asking AI about it.
As we close out this section, Justin, I want to make one more comment, which is like, we're kind of talking about this sometimes as like the marketing throuple is like a little bit scary and it's a loss of power. It's also phenomenal how good AI can be at enabling other people, right? So it's like on the other side of that LLM, it might be a customer. It could also be a salesperson who's making a few new slides, somebody who's on your team. It might be a partner who's building a partner page about how your product works with their product. It could be a journalist. It could be somebody on your team writing a social media post, right? And so you can have your internal documentation and all of that. The challenge with all of that is you're sort of reliant on people accessing the correct information all the time. The more you get out there publicly to enable AI, the more you can ensure that all these people on your team who are just going to do the easy version of the quick claw prompt, whether they should or shouldn't, are actually going to come back with a good result. And so it's like, if we do the work of enabling AI, there is this compounding effect where it continues to do enablement work on our behalf, which is very rewarding.
Yeah. Even within the company. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So we brought up all of these issues, things you have to do, risks, the scary slides about pricing and other stuff like that. So what we want to talk about in the last section here is like, okay, so what do we do? What do we have in our quiver to kind of deal with this stuff? And what we always talk about is content systems and high velocity content systems. Now, I'm going to show you a few slides that show some results from real clients and how to structure this and think about it. One of the things I want to mention is that speed is the outcome of building a real content system. It's not the goal, but it is an outcome of a content system that's working effectively to publish the right things on the right topic in the right way. And I also want to distinguish this from content at scale, which a lot of people have been like, okay, yeah, let's just publish every single variation of every keyword that we can possibly find. And I don't know whether that makes it worse or better. Like, we can do that. It's not hard to do technically. But the thing we really want is both velocity and quality. That's the thing that we need to get to, and consistency. So this is an example of sort of what this can look like, right? So speed is the outcome of a good content system. And if you look at where we start publishing, that's September. And the red is kind of, just like your regular blog post. The yellow is programmatic, or we say batch campaigns, which are more engineered pieces that do all the things that we were just talking about, like responding to certain buyer questions or pain points that you pull from Gong calls or whatever it is. And then LLM assists are kind of in the middle. But you can see that one of the things that we end up doing here is dramatically increasing the velocity of what we're publishing and also making sure it's reasonably high quality. And what happens then is you can often get quite a bit of traffic. So you can see here that this graph literally starts in September and it tracks all of that stuff that I mentioned in the previous slide. One very important note for everybody watching this is that LLM traffic is typically going to show up as direct traffic. So this is all traffic to these pages. There's no paid or anything in here. It's all direct, even if it's not pulled out explicitly. And that's what you need to be looking for, is that direct traffic, because most of the time, ChatGPT, Claude will not give you any way of knowing that it's coming from AI. So this is a good thing to test. So see more traffic, and then also see, and it's a little squished, but those orange bars are direct traffic leads and pipeline. And those are things that you can trace back to those pages. And I go back and forth a lot between, where is it showing up, which LLM should we be thinking about, et cetera. But the point is that people really are searching for these things. And if you can get visible in LLMs, you really can drive additional pipeline opportunities for folks coming from there. So pipeline follows that increase in traffic. You can see it tracks that. And then this is just a little bit of a deeper dive here in terms of, you can't attribute to direct traffic to LLMs, but there are some signs. I think we also have on here, Janessa, a sort of 2-box, which is a little different maybe from the headline, about how we're thinking on the left-hand side about content influence, which is the other thing that we want you to think about, is setting up reports that show influence on conversions, on pipeline, versus LLM visibility. And Janessa, I'm happy to talk through this 2 by 2, but if you would like to, please go ahead or throw it back to me.
Yeah, it's really just the main gist of it is that there is this gap between LLM visibility and pipeline, right? Because of the direct traffic problem. You don't exactly know that somebody saw you in chat and and ended up filling out a demo request form, but you can infer some things, and this is a conversation I think we have to be comfortable navigating internally to say LLM visibility is a proxy metric. And so if we are seeing LLM visibility rise and even traffic rise, and we are seeing the right pipeline coming in, we can infer that the content that we are producing is having a positive result. I also think some of these other signals, like comments or feedback on a post that you published, right? If that is coming from the right people, the kind of people you want to be talking to, you can say, we know we're reaching the right people. We know it's good stuff. We know it's reaching the right people, and we can see pipeline is rising. We know the system is working. And so sometimes marketers are asked to provide results on a level that is too granular. Mm-hmm. And we have to sort of position this conversation at the right level internally to say, is the whole system working? Is the whole system effective? Before we can say, is this particular campaign or this topic or this channel working, right? Is the system working? And if you're driving revenue as seen in growth of pipeline, and you're distributing the brand as seen in LLM visibility, your content system is working.
Yeah. So this is the way to think about that. And yeah, we have this 2 box, which is, there's some other interesting boxes on here too, like what if your LLM visibility is high and your content is not influencing pipeline? Well, that's sort of the wrong topic thing that we were talking about, where you have real depth on the wrong topics. Or, content influence on pipeline is great, but you're not showing up. That's a huge opportunity to figure out how we can. So there are lots of modes here, but of course that ideal is driving revenue and distributing your brand. I'm going to take about 2 more minutes, and then we're going to open up for questions. And what I want to talk in the last couple of minutes about is, so like, what does it look like to build a system, a content system, to help address these things? And this is the kind of architecture of that system that we usually work on with clients. You have your analytics at the bottom, right? That has to tell us as much as we can learn about whether things are working. There's strategy on the top. We have to have a conversation about what topics actually matter to us and which ones don't, and what are we going to prioritize. AI does not make human bottlenecks go away. It just doesn't. What it does do is it lets you produce more, but then we have to review more and think more. So it is not a ticket to publishing thousands and thousands of blog posts that are effective. And then on top of that strategy, we have our brand assets, our messaging, positioning, all of that stuff kind of comes together to form the context that you really need for the system to work. And then on top of that, you've got all of your different sort of places that you're going with your content. So you're going to continue to do editorial content, even if your writers are using Claude a little bit, right, or using an LLM. You're going to do what we call engineered content, which is much more opportunistic. We try a few things using a workflow. We see what hits. We maybe make some edits and publish them. This is great for news topics. And then we also have plays. And plays are things like, here's our update agent that goes into the CMS and automatically adds crosslinks. Here is our play to convert all of our paid keywords to organic ranking keywords. Here's our play to cover all of the pain points that come up on Gong calls every month. Here's our play to cover every industry. So many plays that you can do. And that is a really powerful part of the system for enabling some of these broader depth things that we talked about. There are things that are not on this slide, like content linters and other stuff that you can also use to test your consistency that we'll get into some other time. You still need a content calendar. The content calendar looks like a normal content calendar, except you've got a lot of other things that are your batch campaigns, your opportunistic things. Less might get published because we're just producing more and rejecting some of it, and that's okay. The other thing that we won't spend a bunch of time talking about on this call, but is something that Janessa and I are both very passionate about, is you might be able to run your content system out of GitHub. And a lot of companies we're working with that are technical, we work with them to build that in GitHub. So what does the workflow look like? Where are our brand assets? Are we keeping them up to date? And then this is an example that just shows like, hey, we can repurpose, sessions using this workflow. We can do a play called Everything We've Learned. We can have our LLM writer. All of these workflows are in here. And then the last one, which I really like, is Claude can really easily just publish stuff to your CMS now. So you don't have to do that part anymore if you don't want to. And that's something that we
I'm just curious if people want to pop into chat, how many of you are using Claude Code or, sticking with Coworker chat? Because you're saying, Justin, our more technical teams are working in this way. You do not have to be that technical.
Right.
And I'm testament to this. Truly, the hardest part of working with Claude Code is getting it installed on your machine. And then after that, you just say, Claude, help. I don't know what I'm doing. And it will help you learn about, connecting to GitHub and deploying on Vercel and, the importance of branching and all of that stuff, right? It will handhold you through this. But really what I love so much about Claude Code and GitHub is, first of all, it solves the collaboration problem. Yep. It moves you from ever editing individual Google Docs to editing at the prompt level, which I think is a shift that your team has to make if you're going to actually build content systems. You have to say, you know what, we don't need humans to look at every piece. We need humans to look at a piece and improve the prompt, right? Every time. So every review cycle makes the system better, and that makes your outputs better. Marketers on GitHub now. Awesome. Love that. And I think this is just a powerful unlock. There are a lot of tools popping up for marketers that say, bring your context here, put your context here, and we'll help you. I'm not naming names. See, but I really want to encourage marketers to do the work of learning Claude Code in GitHub, because it gives you an enormous amount of power in customizing your context layer to do what you need it to do, to collaborate with everybody on the team and to build a system that's going to work for you rather than how a given piece of software works. I think that marketers, like developers, have always been in this build versus buy world. Every piece of software, should we do the open source version? Should we, they're accustomed to that world. Marketers, we're all just arriving at this world. We're used to buying software. There are so many MarTech tools, but given how fast the landscape is changing, I really think it's a moment for marketers to step back and say, you know what? Our context layer, we should build it ourselves. Our content systems, we should build it ourselves. And when I say build it ourselves, I mean, work with a partner like Aircule, certainly, but own it. Don't put your brain into a system that you can't access and tailor and adjust. It's honestly too important, because I think the difference between junk LLM content and LLM content that humans respond to and engage with, which is what is happening with Aircule's content, is the quality of your context, right? How much unique data you have, your ability to inject customer comments, quotes, all case studies, material from sales calls. All of that is what is going to make your content sound resonant, right? And matter to people. So this is incredibly important. It's worth the pain.
And the other thing actually, I won't add anything else there. That is great. It is worth a little bit of upfront pain, because this is probably where we're going.
And the pain is minor. It's not, it's a little pain.
One last slide, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But content systems are how we enable AI to market for us. And then just lastly, what to do, right, on Monday or tomorrow, or as soon as you can. Look up your pricing on Claude, see what Claude says about it. Where does it get information? It's really good and illustrative. Treat Claude like an AE. So is there one thing we can do to help enable Claude? Just one. Hey, this is something I saw that was wrong. How can we fix it? And then if you haven't started using Claude Code, maybe Cowork, but definitely Claude Code or GitHub, get started on it and build it, what we call an update agent, which connects to WordPress or your CMS, adds some cross links. Try it out. It's easier than you think to automate all of that stuff now. So that's pretty much it. And I think that's the end of our slides. I would love to take some questions. Amrita, I saw you asked about just publishing the thoughtful take. The thoughtful take can go anywhere. I think the it depends on the exact thoughtfulness of the take, and it's situational, but there's really no reason that you can't have it on your blog, and you have a workflow that's helping you repurpose it for social media. And then, maybe it's also a web page. Like if we're using the context layer and we're setting up the system, you don't have to make as many choices between distribution channels. You can really try to be effective on all of them.
Justin, I have a question for you that I'm curious about. I'm just curious, how do you think about what belongs on a blog versus a URL? Does it matter today?
It is hard for me to say that it matters, like say to Claude or to an LLM. However, there are some other effects of putting things on a blog versus as a main website page. One is that main website pages, especially the homepage, have a really outsized effect on your ranking for that term, not just your homepage's ranking, but the ranking of your entire site. So we've seen a lot of cases where clients, change the positioning on their homepage, and it affects all the pages on their site, because that is one of the ways that machines figure out what you are about and what your expertise is. So the things that are more important, if you can get them on a product or a solutions page that is linked to from every page on the site, that is authoritative, that's great, but it's not strictly necessary, but that's really good to do. That's, the other piece of it is political, honestly, which is it's a lot easier to publish a blog post than it is to publish a product page or a solution page or change the page. So I'll take a blog if we can't get the other things. Adam had asked, if third-party sites are misleading AI, what's the best way to counteract? So I would say a couple of things. Yes, it's great to publish the correct version of the narrative on your site. And that, again, it's a little bit situational, but that is a really good thing to make sure that you're doing. Another thing that you can do is, depending on the exact venue that the wrong statement is in, you may be able to, like if it's a Reddit thread, there might be ways that you can go in and make a comment, to say in an appropriate way, actually, the truth is this, or here's how it's updated. Another thing that you can do in terms of that is, like, sometimes the wrong statement will come from something that you can edit. Hey, we have a G2 listing and the description there is wrong. We have an Amazon partner listing and it says the wrong thing about us. So it depends where those are, but ideally you can fix the narrative on those sites by commenting or saying something or editing the listing. And then also you're putting something on your site that is going to be more authoritative because it's on your own site. Nate, any other questions?
Yeah, we do have a couple of other ones that have been asked. Pardon me. So one question that somebody asked, how do you maintain brand voice and quality when you're also pushing velocity? Like you mentioned, you want to try to do both. Like functionally, how do you go about doing that?
The context layer is really important.
The context layer.
So just having a document that explains in a readable way and in a finite way, because LLMs can't remember everything, but in a finite way, what your brand guidelines are. That really helps. The other thing that really helps is when you go to generate something, providing the correct context for that piece. So what I mean is, if I were going to go to Ramp's site and I were going to write something about, how businesses should think about AP, I wouldn't let the LLM loose on every single AP article on the site. Instead, I would pick a few with the correct information written in the correct way, and then ask LLMs to repackage that existing content. So there are lots of tricks and things like that you can use that let you get to velocity. The last thing we've been experimenting with is using agents to just let us edit more quickly, and also using agents to check anything that's created against the existing site. So these are all not 100% solvable problems, but 85% solvable using this framework.
And the way that I'm thinking about this, Justin, so much is like, I come from a data management background. So I think about structured data. And if you let AI loose on the vast wealth of information on the internet or your Notion database, it'll come back with some wonky stuff. But there are some pieces of information that matter, right? So like your case studies, are all of those parsed in a really clear way? Context coming out of sales calls, right? Are those parsed in a way that match to your messaging work? Another one of my favorite ones is the CEO talks, right? So if your CEO is on a speaker circuit, take every single one of those talks and like parse out the topics. What are the best quotes? What are the really spicy moments? Then as you're building out your plays, you can say, hey, pull in case studies here, reference, pull in exact anonymized quotes from our sales calls. What is a way our CEO would put this? Right. And so those kind of become your databases that make every piece feel unique and special. But if you just ask AI to find what's interesting, it's always going to revert to the common denominator. That's what AI wants, right? It always wants to go to the average. And so you have to tell it exactly how to be specific, and structured data is your best friend there. So just take an extra step. Again, overeager intern, take an extra step to like structure your data and say, hey, now when you're writing this post, these are the exact sources that you pull from. Don't go rogue on all of the information in the world. And that to me is the most exciting thread that I'm currently pulling on with this stuff.
Structuring things for agent and AI comprehension, both on the front end, your own stuff, and then with what you publish, so that it's structured so that it can be understood, is becoming more important. Nate, maybe we have time for one more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a good question. How do I actually audit my website for outdated messaging and inconsistencies?
We have, so what we usually run with clients is something we call a content linter. That literally is a workflow that goes through every page on the site and asks questions to every page. So it says to this page, we're asking the LLM, but the LLM is using the page as part of the prompt. What is this page about? What does it say about the product? Does it adhere to this standard? Does it have any typos? This is a really fun one that we will sometimes run. And so that's the best way to do it, is to build a workflow around your website that goes through it, and you're looking at it on a relatively frequent basis and just seeing like, hey, these are all the pages that have the wrong messaging on them, using that LLM workflow.
Yeah, I think this is work that AI is actually particularly good at. Like, you give it the standards, it's happy to go crunch through a ton of web pages really quickly. So perfect. Well, I think that's we're at time. So just want to say a quick thank you to everybody for attending. Hope you found it to be helpful. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to message us. We are delighted to help any way that we can. And then big thanks to our speakers for sharing your knowledge and your expertise on this. We really appreciate you taking the time on it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for showing up.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day, y'all.
Yeah, bye.